Hola amigos, it's Will here at Will's Custom Figures with another custom figure breakdown, and this time of the one and only Chris Benoit. And for those of you that do know, you'll know that this is quite a controversial figure review, and for those of you that don't know, I'll give a little bit of a backstory and history as to why this is a controversial review here of, to me, one of the greatest, most legitimate wrestlers of all time. Why did I make this? Well, as a kid growing up, taking you right back to the very, very beginning, Chris Benoit, similar height to myself, he worked his way through all the promotions: Extreme Championship Wrestling, WCW, WWF at the time, WWE. He would face off against everybody from Sid Vicious winning the WCW World Championship, the likes of Stone Cold, The Rock, all these absolutely brilliant names. And then his time in ECW, people like Sabu, Taz, and even his time in Japan working with none other than the legendary, and I'll bring him on screen now, Eddie Guerrero. So he'd wrestled a fantastic career, and as a slightly shorter guy and as somebody who wanted to aspire to be a wrestler myself, man, Chris Benoit, there was no better idol. Who else could you look up to where you can really legitimately see that this guy is a beast and a monster in the professional wrestling business? So that's the reason why I've made Chris Benoit, and I was such a fan, from his fantastic matches, his ladder match against Chris Jericho, still to this day one of the greatest matches of all time, to his series of matches with Kurt Angle, breaking his neck, overcoming adversity, and coming back at WrestleMania 20 and winning the World Heavyweight Championship. I believe it was the World Heavyweight Championship from not only Triple H, but the most legendary wrestler of all time in Shawn Michaels. So very, very big fan of Chris Benoit, as you can tell. The controversy comes because, unfortunately, the man loved the wrestling business more than literally life itself. He sacrificed his body for too long, and unfortunately, because of that, the brain traumas that he took doing the diving headbutt, the weapon shots to the head, pride himself on really putting every single bit of his heart and soul and passion on the line in his professional wrestling matches. Chris Benoit had damaged his brain so badly that he ended up doing something extremely, extremely horrific, and took his own life, including taking the life of his young son and his wife as well, in quite tragic, awful circumstances. So the legend from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, ended up unfortunately destroying his legacy because of the actions that he did outside of the ring in the last couple of days of his life. Now, I'm going to end on a high in a minute. I'm going to give you a little bit of story and a breakdown how I made this figure, why I made it, and everything else first, and then we'll end on the positives that have come out of that very, very horrific and awful situation. Now, how did I make him? I used a WWE Ruthless Aggression upper body, as you can probably tell here from the far more muscular physique than his Kurt Angle and Chris Jericho counterparts from the Metal Elite collection. I used a basic, and I always use the basics for my own personal custom figures. I used a basic lower body. I'm not using these guys for posing. They're just on display, standing there as my legendary setup would go. I have all of my favorite Attitude Era and ECW and legendary wrestlers of all time from, you know, all over the different eras of professional wrestling. And that's all he's used for. He's used just as a display item. Time-wise, I used a little bit of clay, as you can probably see around this slightly damaged now body. So around the waist, Chris Benoit always used to wear his tights just beneath the belly button, hence the added clay to take it up to that point. Lots of super glue around the middle as well of the torso to attach the basic legs on there. I used the Vallejo paints, as I always like to go on about, and not very time consuming, but one of the earliest custom wrestling figures I actually made. So you can probably see there's not as much paintwork on there, but I tried to do a few little creative things like covering up the joints, as you can see here, the little holes for the pivots in the arm, and same as in the wrists as well, to try and give it that slightly more realistic look. I hadn't yet at that point, when I made this 3.5 years ago, mastered doing skin colors and blending. So height-wise, just for any of you people that are interested at all in that, he stands at, I would probably say, just under 7 inches. As mentioned, he's probably slightly shorter than Kurt Angle and Chris Jericho, but on a display, you really can't tell. The articulation is as normal with any other of the Ruthless Aggression wrestlers. His arms go up and down, his head moves as well. I just don't want to move it too much at this point because it has been on display for so long, and the paintwork I also don't want to damage. Yeah, you can see the head still moves well here. A little bit of paintwork and glossing and things on the eyes to bring out the realistic features. And the lower body, as you can see, he has these Wolverine tears in his wrestling attire, which hopefully this camera shot does it some justice of with the Crippler logo. I do actually need to update this attire. I think my favourite attire was the sort of pinkish purple wrestling attire with these same tears from his days in the Radicals, where they come to WWE, WWF at the time for the very first time with Perry Saturn, Eddie Guerrero, and of course the one and only Dean Malenko. So to end on a high with this figure, one of the great things that come out of the passing of Chris Benoit, very, very unfortunately, was the change into the WWE Wellness Policy. So at the time, I believe that steroids were rife within the professional wrestling business, and you could see a dramatic turn in that after Chris Benoit's passing, an unfortunate passing of Eddie Guerrero a couple of years before that. So for me, that's a really good thing, because it means that the wellness of the wrestlers still to this day, and myself as a very, very, very small-time wrestler that did a little bit of work on the UK independent scene, it meant that it was more feasible for somebody like myself to actually make it into the WWE. I lost my dad at quite a young age, and I certainly wouldn't want to be putting my son through the horrific loss of a parent due to substance abuse. In addition to that, there was no more chair shots to the head. That was changed, and although the wrestling industry was put under a massive period of time where it was sort of quite frowned upon after Chris Benoit murder-suicide tragedy took place, in the long run, I think it has benefited a lot of wrestlers, because at the time, unprotected chair shots to the head were rife within the wrestling business in all promotions, and now it really, really is frowned upon, apart from your extreme wrestling that you get in some parts of the world. And I think to end, on the final note here, the difficulty comes for me in watching a Chris Benoit wrestling match. My son knows that Chris Benoit is my favourite wrestler. How am I, at some point, going to explain to him why Chris Benoit really is frowned upon within the wrestling industry or within the wrestling business? It's going to be a very difficult conversation for me to have. And for his wrestling career alone, I need to be very clear, he was my hero. He really was. He made it seem reachable as something that I could attain one day, being a professional wrestler. So thank you, Chris Benoit, for everything you did for the professional wrestling industry in your career. And unfortunately, the events that took place in your last couple of days on Earth have tarnished that legacy. But this is my tribute to the wrestling career of Chris Benoit. If you have any questions, if you want any advice on how to make this figure yourself, any suggestions or anything to make it look even better and to work on something else in future, please let me know. Please comment, like, subscribe, follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and on YouTube as well. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Take it easy, and thank you so much for watching my big bag breakdown of my favourite professional wrestler as a child, Chris Benoit.